Hey y'all, today's video is going to be my May recent reads. The first series I read was the Dork Diary series. That series has 15 books in it. The next book I read was called Conditions of a Heart, and I gave that book 5 stars. The main character had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and she also had mast cell activation disorder. The next book I read was called Freshman Year, and it was about this girl who was in college and a freshman, and I gave that 5 stars, and it brought back memories of when I was a freshman. The next book I read was called Love Light Farms, and the next book I also read of that same series was In the Weeds, and I gave both of those 4 stars. The third and the fourth book are still on hold, so I will read those eventually. The next book I read was Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. I love that book. Even though it had a lot of heavy topics, I gave that book 5 stars. The next book I read was called Out of Office and I gave that book 3 stars. The next book I read was Aesop. It was the second book of a duology. The first book was called XOXO, and I gave that book 5 stars. After that, I read Chronically Dolores, and it was about this girl who had a bladder condition, and I gave that book 5 stars. The next book I read was called With or Without You by Eric Smith, and it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. After that, I read Sweet Spot by Rebecca Genshak, and it was a golfing romance, and I gave it 3 stars. After that, I read Truthfully Yours by Hayden Armstrong, I believe, and I gave that book 4 stars. The next book I read was called Hate Mail, and it was about these 2 main characters who were writing letters to one another, and I gave it 4 stars. After that, I read Barely Floating, and it was about this girl who is Mexican American, and she wants to be a synchronized swimmer, so she joins the LA Mermaids, and it's really good. I gave it 5 stars. After that, I read Finally Fits, which is the sequel of the book called I can't remember the first book, but I gave Finally Fits 5 stars as well.